Hey everybody, it's Dak here from the Ed Boys, and welcome to episode 4 of the Wolf of the Grain Exchange. We ended the last episode at 10 mil, so that is clearly what we are starting off with. Pretty happy about that amount because I feel like I can actually start to flip some fairly expensive items, obviously not anything huge quite yet. One thing that kind of occurred to me a couple times when I thought about doing this series, thought about trying to flip to 100 mil, was that I really haven't done that much flipping. I've tried it a few times. I've never really done it for more than a couple hours though, and I've never really tried it with more than 4 or 5 mil. So having a decent amount of cash was one thing I was looking forward to, so I can start flipping items like the Abyssal Whip. This was probably the item that I had the most anticipation about. I know that it is traded fairly often because it's a popular weapon. It's pretty expensive, as you can see, about 2.4 mil right now, so I figured the profit margins must be there. It must be something that I can make a good profit off of. And it turns out it is. For my first attempt at flipping them, I was able to get a profit margin of 25k, which is not too bad because I'm able to trade up to 20 an hour. So clearly I used the first one to price check, and then the second one I make back the money that I lost when price checking it. So 18 of them at 25k a piece is pretty good. That actually adds up to 450k for a single item, which is clearly more than any other item I've gotten. And even if that alone took an hour, that would be a better profit than I've ever gotten. So trying out the Abyssal Whips, so far the most successful thing we have done, and I can imagine it's only going to get better as we keep getting more money. Another thing that I kind of decided at this point was that for those lower level supply items, I was going to stick with cannonballs and Zulra's scales because they're both very quick to flip, and I can now afford to buy the entire GE limit at once. That would be 18,000 Zulra's scales and 7,000 cannonballs. For both of those items, when I flip the entire limit, I tend to make between 50 and 100k, which isn't phenomenal, but it's not that bad either because it only takes a couple of minutes, and I just do it once every 4 hours, obviously. It adds up to a little bit of extra profit. Another expensive item that I tried were infinity boots. As you can see, they are about 1 mil a piece, and the profit margin for these was still pretty good too, a little bit over 20k. It's the same idea. If I can trade 24 infinity boots, not just 20, but still with 20 to 25k profit, I can make 4 to 500k off of a single item, where I'm pretty used to being able to make like 50k off of a single item. So the first two more expensive items that we tried here definitely turned out to be a success. Plus, as you can see, I've been flipping some serpentine helms. I didn't get too many of them to work. Those are really kind of a toss-up if the profit margin's where I want and if people are buying and selling, but it never seems to turn out negatively, so I always make a little bit of profit with that. Same thing with these Varix flails. I've tried them a couple of times now, and they've always worked a little bit, making a decent amount of profit, so it's not like it's a waste of time to do it, but it's not one of my top items by any means. I think I may have mentioned this at least in the last episode, but I'm going to try to look through the Borrows items for more items to flip. I know those are generally more expensive items. As you can see, this Guthan's chest plate is, or excuse me, the Guthan's plate body is a little bit over 400k, and it turns out to be a decent profit margin. I had a hard time selling these ones back, but overall, one of the strategies I am going to start using will be looking through the Borrows items to see if I could find decent items to flip. But to start off this episode, I did find a couple of more expensive items, whips and infinity boots, that worked out pretty well, and I actually made more profit than I ever have in a single hour. As you can see, I made 10.5, or excuse me, I'm at 10.5 mil, so I'm at about 500k, and it took just less than an hour, enough that I would round up to an hour to say 500k an hour profit. It's still not anything phenomenal. You can beat that for sure, but it's one of the better profits I've made in the game lately, and it's easily the best profit that I've made flipping. So I'm very excited about that, very happy. After that happened, I decided to work on some of the more medium level items like Berserker Helms, Helm of Neatsnot. I tried some Dragon Med Helms a little bit, but they didn't work out too well as they did last time I tried them. In general, helms that cost between like 30 and 60k seem to be pretty good items to flip. I did go back to the Ronar seeds. I was going to try Snapdragon seeds too, but I don't think I got to it. I think eventually I moved on without trying it. But the seeds definitely worked out pretty well. I did notice that as I flipped the seeds, it seems like they start off a lot harder than they end. If I go to buy 100, in this case about 100, I haven't actually tried to go to the 200 maximum quite yet. The first 50 or the first 100 you'll usually buy pretty well, and the first 50 you'll sell back for a really crazy profit margin, and then it seems to slow down most of the time. The profit margin will kind of shrink a little bit. I don't necessarily have to lower the prices to get them to sell, but if I don't, it starts to take a ridiculously long time, so eventually I do kind of lower the prices because there is kind of that fine line between how much money you're making during a flip and how much time it takes to make that flip happen. Clearly, if it takes too long, it doesn't matter how much you made. It took you 3 days to flip an item for 100k. Better to flip it in 1 day for 50k, if that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. It's just mathematically sound. It actually took me a lot longer to flip the Berserker Helms and Helm of Needs Knots than it usually does. Another couple of items I should have tried, like I mentioned, were Snapdragon Seeds. Warrior's Helms seem to do pretty well. These medium level items that are between 30 and 70k. Dragon Scimitars are another one that I made some decent profit on. They're pretty good for making about 1k per flip, and you can usually trade 50 to 70 of them. So 50 to 70k per item. Clearly, if you just get 4 or 5 of those items during an hour, that's between 200 and 350k an hour, which isn't phenomenal. I just made 500k an hour a little bit ago, as we were talking about, but it's still pretty good. It's not like you can't do both. You know, if I can make the 500k an hour and flip these for 200k an hour, that would be 700k total. Makes sense. Another big factor that can be determining what you're flipping is the grain exchange buying limits. If you've gone through all the expensive items that you can afford and you can flip and you made a bunch of cash with it and it took you 2 hours, you still have a few hours before you can start flipping those again. So maybe moving down to those medium level items or even back down to some supplies like ores and runes and whatnot is a decent option so that you can at least keep going and keep making money. Obviously, as you start to make even more money, it just opens up more items to you, like those 10 to 20 mil items, and even more expensive things like Armadile God Swords and whatnot once you get up in the 50 mil range. So as you get more money, you probably can start to stray away from even these medium items and clearly away from the supplies like I was trying to do. But overall, it's just really a matter of finding a lot of items that you like to flip and just flipping all those in a 4-hour period and restarting it. Seems to be type of strategy that I'm looking for, at least. As you can see here, I started working on some Verax helms. I almost just said flails, but they are clearly helms. And it kind of lied to me at first. When I did my first price check, it was looking like a 200k profit margin, and I definitely had to dull it down from there. But I ended up getting a few to buy, and I got all of them to sell for a decent profit, as you'll see in a minute. So it turns out I made like 200 to 300k from those things. Definitely very happy with that. I'm gonna stick to those borrows items, like I said. Only tried one extra since saying that, and it worked out really well. As I started to approach 15 mil, I was kind of getting tired of those medium level items. The profit was a little bit slower, and I'd only tried 2 more rare items not rare items. They're kind of rare, but it really meant expensive items. And I figured I wanted to go back to that, see if I can duplicate the money that we had made before. Now, what I tried out at first were dark bows and dragon chain bodies. The dark bows worked out pretty well. They had a decent profit margin, but you can only trade up to 8 an hour, so it's not phenomenal. But since you can only do 8, it would take like, what, 10 minutes? This took me about 10 minutes, so I'm assuming it would take about 10 minutes every time to flip 8 dark bows. Dragon chain bodies, on the other hand, were great. First of all, I had a 55k profit margin on them, and it started working out really well. I didn't just work the first time, then it dropped down to 20k. I actually got to flip a handful of them at 55k a piece. The only problem is I don't actually know the limits on them. The site that I've been using, the wiki, doesn't actually have dragon chain bodies on there, which means I don't know the limits, but I'm assuming around 20 because of their price. Actually, if any of you guys know the limit, go ahead and comment that, because that'll help everyone here. Another item that I tried out were Berserker Rings. I've actually, back when a long time ago, one of the first times I ever tried flipping, I used Berserker Rings because that was the example given to me when I was taught how to do it, and it worked well, so I figured, I'll try it again here, and it worked well again. I only got a couple of them to flip. At this point, I was approaching 15 mil, and I was trying to finish it up on this day, and it was getting kind of late at night, so it started to get kind of difficult to flip. Clearly, when nobody's trading, it's impossible to be flipping an item because I need people to be buying and selling. So if I got no one around buying or selling, I can't flip my items. Fortunately enough for me, I had made enough money at this point to where if I sold everything I had, I would have 15 mil, a little bit extra actually. I kind of went over by about 100k, which is where I wanted to stop on this episode. Which means this is where we're going to be wrapping up the episode, everybody. I hope you enjoyed. I know I did. We dove into a little bit more expensive items, and it worked out so far, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what we can do as we keep getting more money. Thanks again for watching, everybody. As I said before, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Thank you everyone for watching today's video. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to click on that like button and tell us what you enjoyed about it. If you're looking for some more RuneScape videos like this one, then be sure to join the cul-de-sac by subscribing for more. We will see you next time.